Alright, welcome back to another part of this tutorial, and today hopefully we are going to work with our API. So first things we need to do is go to TMDB and have a look at the API and see what we need. So right here on the TMDB API reference, so if you don't know how to get here, just check the previous video, showed you how to do that. So in the API reference, we can look for what we need. So there are quite a number of endpoints here we can hit. So you can see those that I get are things we can get information from, and those that are posts are those we can send information to. So we can look at our app and see that we need to hit the trending movies endpoint so that we can populate that here. So how do we do that? So on the side here, we can search by saying movies, and if you scroll through we can see trending. So if I select this, then we are taken to the movies endpoint. So how do I know that? So if you scroll all the way down, so let's say, I don't know why I'm doing this again, but let's say I had to scroll through here to find that. So you can see we have changes, we have collections, companies, configurations, and so on. So as you keep moving, you can see you have a number. So let's say you were looking for a discover category, then you would be hitting this endpoint for movie or TV shows. And you can keep going and you can see a whole lot of things. So for example, we have movies list here, and we have now playing, popular, top rated, upcoming. Okay, you can see we used a few of these in the app, but then what we need now is trending. So we'll be visiting this group soon, but what we need is the movies section. So that's a bit downward. So here, so trending, so you can look for all that is trending, series, movies, people, or TV series, but what we need here is movies. So once you have this selected, it shows you the endpoints that you would have to hit. Now this is why I said you need to study the documentation, get to know your API, then you know what you need. Because if you look at this, you can see this time_window, which means that this endpoint requires a certain parameter. So you can see time_window, and by default is set to day, meaning trending movies for a day, and here would be trending movies for the week. Okay, as you can see, and aside that, it doesn't really have any required parameters. So make sure you are logged in into your account. That will automatically give you your access token or your API key. Okay, so what we can do now is try it. Okay, so hit try and let's see. So I said this earlier, sometimes it fails. So let's try the access token and then hit try again, and the access token works. So I don't know how visible this is. It's quite difficult to see, but you can see this is our response over here. Okay, now I'm actually not going to look through this because it's a bit difficult to show you guys through this part. So what I'm going to do is, like I showed you the other way, you can grab the endpoint. So in fact, instead of grabbing this, now what you can do is you can grab this URL from here. Now if this is going to confuse you, I mean, looking at this, if you don't really understand what's going on, this is in curl. So what you can do is shell, you can use node if you are familiar with it, and then that way you might get to know, like, this is the URL you need if it's Ruby, PHP, or any language. So I think this is pretty standard. So I'm going to select this URL, and you see they've appended a day already. So I'm going to select that. Once I have that selected, I'll copy it and then go to my browser and then paste that in. And like I showed you the last time, do not hit enter for now, and go back to your movies and then grab your API key. So select API key auth here and then copy this, and then come back here, place a question mark for a query, and then say API_key, and then equal to, then we add our API key, and now you can hit enter. Now I believe I talked about this in the previous video, but make sure you have some kind of JSON formatter installed in your browser. So what I'm using here is JSON Viewer Pro. Okay, that's what I'm using. So without JSON Viewer Pro, it's going to be a whole lot of a mess to understand our JSON. So that I talked about in the previous video, so you can check that out. But this is what we are going to be referencing from. Now, one of the things you need to understand is your JSON, what it is returning, what is my API returning. So you can see we have a map here that has a key of page and a value of 1, and then we have this list that this results, okay, which is a list of maps. So this map returns a single movie, okay, a single trending movie. So if you look here, you can see the title of the movie is The Flash, and the poster path and a whole lot of information, and this is all we need to populate all our cards. Okay, these are the details that we need. Now you don't need every single thing. Of course, I don't need this, okay, in my app. So it all depends on the context what you're building. I may not need the genre IDs. I may not need, like, I don't need to access this for whatever. It doesn't have any video, so I don't even need it. So what we need to do is create data classes to house all of this, because it's okay to get a response from the API, but working with it without it being in a Dart object can be cumbersome. Now I'll direct you to this Flutter cookbook, how to fetch data from the internet, and it does a pretty good job and actually explains why you would want to create Dart objects, because the future that response is kind of cumbersome to work with. So it's a lot easier if you have things in a Dart object, and they actually take you through how this works and what it means. So I'm actually going to do the same thing just so you have an idea, but I'll show you other ways of doing this faster. So back to VS Code, what we want to do is let's create a new folder in our lib folder. So I'll say new folder, I'll call this models, and then in here I'm going to create a file, and I'll call this I don't know what to call this, but let's say movie.dart. Okay, now this is going to be a regular class, so this is not going to be no material imports here. And then we are going to say class, and then we are going to call this movie. Okay, now we need to mock up the properties from the API. Okay, what do I mean by that? When we come back to the API, how do I access these things, okay, in mocking up the properties? So I can see that we have, for example, the title, and then it is a string. Okay, the flash is a string, and then we have something like maybe original title, which is the same as the flash, it's also a string. We have overview, which is a key, and we also have the entire thing being a string. Now if I come down to something like popularity or vote average, you can see the vote average is a double here. Okay, so my main point is you need to look at what you're building and access or create the properties of the fields you need. Okay, you don't need every single thing that is here. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I hope this won't be confusing. I'm going to copy all of this up to this point, then let's head back to VS Code. Right below here I'm going to paste this, and I'm going to select everything and then comment it out by Ctrl//, and now I can have a reference to this here as I build them. So my first property here, I know a bunch of them are already going to be strings, so I'm going to say string. Now what name do I give to this? So I'm going to access the title, so these don't have to be the same. Okay, so I'm going to say string title. The next thing I need here, so I'll make it a copy of that, I need the backdrop path, so I'll call this backdrop path. Then the next thing I need here is, let's grab the original title. So in some movies, some APIs, they may be different. Okay, so let's grab that to be safe. So let's say original title. Then what do we need again? So we've grabbed the backdrop path, we've grabbed the title, original title, sorry. Then we need the overview. So this also is overview. And what else do we need? So we have the overview, and we also need the poster path. So let's grab that. So poster path, and they are all still strings. Like I said, you look at the key. So remember, it's a map. So look at the key and see the value. So we get the data type based on the value. So the value is a string, and that's why we have a string for original title. So we've had the poster path. We don't need media type, and in the app we are building, we don't need genre IDs. We don't need the popularity. We need a release date. So let's grab that. So I'm going to say string. Wait, did I create? Okay, so I did already. So I'll say release date, just like this. And then let's see, what else do we need? So we've got the release date, and we need the vote average. So let's put in the vote average. So vote average. And if you did exactly what I did, don't forget to change the vote average, because you can see that returns a double here. So we simply need to change this to a double also, just like that. And as it stands, that's about it. So you may be working with an API that you need every field it provides, and for that you have to get everything, okay? And for those that you don't need, you pick what you need and leave the rest, just like I've done, okay? So I'm going to get rid of this now, and I hope this first part makes sense. Now that we've done this, we need to create a constructor for this. So at this point, I'm assuming you've done a bit of that programming, so you know classes, constructors, name constructors, and things like that. But essentially, a constructor is just a function that is going to take the object of a class and create an instance for you. But let's leave it there for now. You can just follow along, but I would entreat you go over some short that course if you don't know about this. But anyway, so to create a constructor, it bears the same name as the class. So we are going to call this movie. Now I know I could generate this easily, but I just want to show you the process of doing this. And maybe you've seen this a billion number of times. And then in here, I want to make this a named constructor. So I'm going to use the parentheses in there. And then in here, I am now going to say that I'm going to require all of these whenever I am creating a movie object. So I'm going to say required, and then we use the this keyword, not theme, and then refer to the title. So we are just saying that we are referring to this title. That's just what this means, if that makes it any easier. And I'm literally going to do this for all the properties. So there's no need to watch me keep doing this. So I'll be back when I am done with all of these. Alright, so when you're done with everything, this is what it's going to look like. And I don't know why I have material imported. Oh, the theme, something that I mistakenly typed. So yeah. Now, after you do this, then here comes the final bit of what we have to do. So remember, we are receiving a JSON, and we need to find a way where we can pass each of the JSON keys, each of the JSON values, okay, into these various fields we've created. So for example, if I am receiving title, then I need to figure out a way of saying that when we get the title, kindly pick the actual title, so this string here, and then dump it inside this field for me. That is essentially what we are trying to do. So we need a function for that, and we are going to create what we call a factory constructor. And if you don't know what a factory constructor is, so imagine you are in what do you call it, a toy factory, and basically a toy factory creates toys of any kind. Okay, so you have a bunch of machines that create these toys, and most of them will be focused on creating all sorts of toys. But then let's say there's just that one machine that makes what toys out there, I don't know, like teddy bear. I don't know why teddy bear is coming to mind, but let's say there's a particular machine that makes a teddy bear. That's all it does. It makes a teddy bear, cannot make any other thing. But you have other machines that are out there that can make all kinds of other toys. Okay, so a factory constructor is something like that. So when you say this constructor is a factory constructor, then it has only one purpose, and its purpose is to do what you give to it. I don't know if that simplifies the whole factory thing, but this function, we are calling it this named constructor, we are calling it from JSON. So if you don't know a named constructor, so remember this is a constructor and we can repeat this here, so we have to give it a name, and that does it this way. So you mention the constructor name and then you now give it the actual name that you want. So from JSON, this is the usual convention. It could be anything, but this, we are passing data from a JSON. And usually we are going to say that it's going to take a map. So remember, our JSON is a map first. So if you look back here, you can see it's a map, and most often than not you would always receive that. So we are going to say map, and remember that a map always has the type of what do you call it, a string, a key and a value, and the keys are always strings. There's no two ways about that. The key is always a string. So let's go ahead and put in the type there, and then for the value, now actually let me get rid of this so I don't confuse you guys. Now for the value, it will be hard for me to put in a specific type. Do I put in a double? Do I put in a string? I don't know if you get what I'm trying to say. So if I go back here, you can see that this is a key and this is a value. Key, value, key, value. So in this map, we have a key of adult, and you can see all the keys here are strings, but you can see the values are different. So this is false, and we know true or false, that's a boolean. So I cannot go ahead and say, okay, boolean here, because if I say bool, I keep saying boolean, but essentially that's it. If I say bool, what about this that isn't a bool, or what about this that isn't? So the way we account for that is to use dynamic, and dynamic is just an English keyword. So when something is dynamic, it changes. Okay, the same idea. So we are going to say that we are going to receive a map of type string dynamic, so string keys dynamic values, and then we are going to call this so mostly it's just called JSON, so let's call it JSON. And then you can go with the return like this, and then you want to return the movie constructor. Okay, you want to return the movie constructor, or you can go with the fat arrow, so like this also, and then return movie. So whichever floats your boat, you can use it, but I think I'm going to go with the other method because I think we are kind of used to this for a while, so I think I'll use this to make things a lot easier. So we are returning the constructor we've created here. So we are going to go ahead and say movie, and now you can see it is telling us to fill in all of these, which we are going to go ahead and do. Can I format this so that it's well placed? So let me see if I can format this. Okay, here we go. So now I need to assign the actual titles that we get from the JSON into the title objects that we have here, so that each time we are creating a movie object, we have those values in there. So what we are going to do is now we take the JSON that we have here, and we are going to say that this JSON we want to access, so using the square brackets. Now this is very important. This part is very important. Now you need to look at what you need to access. So if, for example, I need to access the title, I need to access the original title, overview, and things like that. Now at this part, you need to type them exactly as the JSON returns them. So I have to type original title as it is. I have to type release date as it is, vote average as it is. Okay, so this part is very important. If you make a mistake, you'll run into an error. Okay, you will run into an error during your API call or something. So be quite careful how you name these things when it gets to this part. So over here, the title, for that we know is just title. Now we come back here and we are simply going to repeat the same thing if VS Code will allow me. So we can say JSON square brackets, and then in here I can assume there is backdrop underscore path. Now let me not get ahead of myself, let me actually check that. So we have backdrop path, so exactly that. So if you wanted to be on the safer side, you can be copying these. So original title is the next thing I want to jump to. So here I would say JSON square brackets, then I'll paste the original title there. You get the idea. So I'm going to go ahead and finish this, and I'll be back when I'm done. All right, so I'm done getting everything. Now I'm just going to throw this there, but like I said, I'm just aiming to get you started and understand things on the basic level. You can go ahead after this and then learn the more complicated stuff. Okay, so over here what you can do is you can cast these as their actual type. So I can say as string, just to be like more type safe. Another thing you can also do is let's say something happens and for some reason the JSON returns an empty string for a title. That means you're going to pass in like or returns nothing, so that means a null, and you know, with sound null safety you're going to have a problem. So what you can do is you can use a null aware operator and say that so let me just do this and then explain what I've just done if you're not aware. So all I'm just saying is that if we don't receive anything here, then use this as a default title, if I can put it that way over here. So whatever happens, if something happens and over here we don't get anything from the JSON, we'll always have a fallback value which will always be assigned to this. Okay, that's something you can do for more serious things, but for now I'll just keep it very simple. Okay, now there is a last part you may see people do, and what we are doing is not necessary, but I just feel like I'll talk about it. So you also have a JSON function you can create, or let me say method, because and that is meant for if you are going to post. So if you are going to send data over to an API, then you want to create that, and usually you send it via in a map form. So in the same way, you are going to have your map being type string dynamic, and then the common name we call this is toJSON. So again, this can be anything. Okay, and let's not forget our function block, and you can go ahead and then return, and then here what you want to go ahead and do is return the various keys. Okay, but the way I like to do this is when I use the return, it's a bit difficult to work with, so I use the fat arrow here most of the time, like so. And then what we'll do here is this, and then we can, so let me go ahead and just, so I'm not going to complete this, but just to show you. So now I am sending a JSON, so I want to say that for the key of the JSON I'm targeting, so I'm targeting the title, for example. Okay, and then once we get the title, if I can get this, I'll pass in the title. So all I'm saying is when we get the JSON, we access the title key, we pass in the title. Now the title is whatever I would be passing using my constructor. Okay, that is something you would eventually do if you are going to post to an API of some sort. So always remember to check the API together. So I'll do the last one and then get rid of this. So for example, if I want to pass some overview, maybe I want to be the first person to write the overview for the movie, then I can say I'll assign this to overview, just like that. And I'm going to continue to do that till I finish the rest, but we don't need this since we are not posting to that API. Okay, we are not posting to that API. So I hope this part makes sense. Okay, so let's see how we can use this in making our API call. Now, to make our API call, we would create a new folder, and then we'll call it API. You can call it API service or anything. I'll just call it API. Then inside this folder, I'll create a new file and then call it, I'll just call it API so that I don't have to struggle with names, api.dart. So over here, we are going to have class API. And in this class, we want to do a number of things. Now, I'm going to try my best to make this quite simple. And one thing I will do also is I'm going to create a file. This is not necessary, but it's a good practice to hide certain things like your API key. So I can just show you one sneaky way of doing it. So I'm going to create a new file and I'm going to call it constants, or any name that you want. Constants. Oops, that shouldn't be uppercase. So constants, making me feel like watching Constantine. Constants.dart. Hope I spelled that right. Okay. Now in this constant.dart, we want to place certain things like the API key. Okay. So we can go to the browser. Then here we can grab our API key, head back to VS Code, and then here I'll create a class, call it constants, and then in here we will create a static const and call it API underscore, in fact no underscore, key, and then we assign our API key. We put it in here. Okay. Now, one thing to notice, let's go back to the API. Before that, let's move ahead. I think I'll probably talk about that in the next video. So let's go back to our API. Now that we have that, we need to lay down some foundation. So we need to get the URL or the endpoint that will be hitting, okay, to get the data we need. And we have that in the browser already. So what I'll do is I'm going to create a static const and I'll make this a private variable. So we'll call it trending URL, URI, whichever way you want to call it. And then this would be equal to, so head back to the browser, and over here we are going to grab this one. So grab everything, and then we are going to paste this as a string. Okay, so let me close that and then paste this in. Pretty long. Now, if you want, you can go ahead and isolate all of these into their own variables. So you can have from here to here its own thing. Then you can have the kind of thing you want. So maybe popular. So this can be in a different variable. Then the time of day. Okay, then this is just movie. And then the time of day is here. You can separate all of them, but I don't want to do that. Okay, I just want to keep this simple. I keep saying that. So the only thing that I'm complicating here is hiding the API key. So instead of having this line in there, what we can do is we can access that API key we've just stored. So we can use our $ symbol, so string interpolation, and then say that we want to access, if I can see what I'm doing, the constants, and then get the API key. And literally that's it. I don't know whether this is too big or too small to see. So if I do this, I know that's too small, but it's just that. So back to the size. Okay, so now we move on to the fun part. So in here, we are going to return a list, and this list, the type for this list is going to be our movie. Okay, the movie we created, the movie class we created. So this guy, we are saying that our list is going to be of this type. We are going to call this just call it get trending movies, and this is going to be called as an asynchronous function. So async functions are, so basically an async function, so take it this way, you know, computers run like code will run like from top to down unless you give it some condition to flow. So you know, we are getting this from the internet, so it's possible the internet could be slow, anything could happen, it will take a while for the data to come. So you don't want your entire app to wait while this is working. So your app is going to continue while this is still processing asynchronously. So it's not synchronous, it doesn't work at the same time as your code, it can work independently of your code. So when it later gets the object, it will return it. So it's like a future. I'm going to get some data in the future. So in the future, I will return something. I don't know if I'm making things worse, but let's move on. So what we want to do here is, I almost forgot one thing. So what we need to do is we need to mark this function as a future, and this entire thing is going to be a future list. I don't know why that part got missing. So I hope this isn't confusing. So like I was saying, okay, we use this to mark something that is async, okay, a computation that is going to occur or may use a lot of time and you don't want to waste time waiting for it. So it actually gives you basic explanation here. So this is going to be a future, and we are going to make it a list of movies, and the movie is the movie that we have here, and we're calling it get movies API, and we are marking it as async function. Now what we can do is we can say final, and then we can say response. So I just need to type this out this way, is equal to, then since we've marked this as async, we can make use of the await keyword, which is just like we are going to get some response, but wait for it. It's not going to just happen instantly, because this is where we now make a call to the API. So at this point we want to get the HTTP class in here. So I already have that imported for you guys. So I'm going to say import, then say HTTP. We already have that. Then what I'll do here is mark this as HTTP. So doing this is like giving this entire thing a nickname, because that already has some response classes in there, and HTTP comes with response also. So you just type response. It may get confusing to which response you need. So marking this as HTTP, then we know that each time we say HTTP dot something, then we are referring to this. It's more or less like you have friends that are twins, but you want to, okay, well that's a bad analogy, because you still look at them and get confused. But you can tell the twin, I'll call you A twin, and then the other one is just twin. So when you say A twin, the other one responds. I don't know if that makes sense, but yeah, let's move on. So here we can now make use of the HTTP, and not that. And then here we need to get, because we're making a get response. So http.get, we have post and things like that. And then the URL we need, we are going to say URI, and then we are going to parse this. And then here is where we pass in our trending URL, just like so. Now, after we've done this, we need to make a statement. We need to check. So we are going to say that if the response, okay, so we are always, so this response, okay, whatever we get in this response, we need to check. We can access a few things from it. So if I put a period here, you can see the kind of response we can get. We can get all of these things: body bytes, content headers, request, status code. Okay, and it's a status code we need here. Now there are a bunch of status codes that are out there when you are making requests over the internet. So an example status code is 200. When your status code is 200, it means everything is okay. If your status code is, so a popular one is 404, which simply means like a page cannot be found. I'm sure you've seen that a lot. So we are saying that if it's 200, meaning that everything went fine, then we want to go ahead and then decode that JSON. Okay, so we can say final, and I'll call this decoded data is equal to then JSON.decode. Oops, I spelled that wrongly. JSON.decode. You know what? Just spell it since that's one to. Oh my god. And let me actually end this here. So we are saying JSON.decode. Now, what do we want to decode? Okay, we want to decode the response, but then we cannot decode the entire response because you see all the things we get. So the response object here, we can access the body of it. So this is literally like saying the response we get, this is the body of the API. So the body, this is what we want to decode. Okay, so that's what we've accessed here. Now, if you realize, I told you, so we are accessing the entire body here. Okay, but then what I want is actually the results. I don't need this entire thing, anything. I don't need these. I just want only the results. So how can we do that? We can do that by accessing the results part. Okay, so out here, I can bring in a square bracket and then my quotes here and then say results. Now you need to make sure you spelled it exactly as it is here. Okay, so results, and then just to make sure I get, and just to, and we'll cast this as a list because obviously we are receiving a list, as you can see from the API. Okay, now at this point it will be nice to test this to see if we are making any progress or doing anything. Okay, so what we can do to test that is we can go to our, where is our home screen? We can go to our home screen, and one of the reasons why I made this a stateful widget is exactly what I'm about to do. So over here we are going to call a function. So over here what we'll do is we are going to create a late future, and if I can find my keys, and this, not a question mark, and this late future is going to be of type list, and this list is also going to be of type movie, so the movie we created, and then I'll call it trending movies. So let's import this. Oh, I spelled that totally wrong. So late is just saying I would assign the value to this later, so make sure you assign it. If not, you are going to get an error. So what we want to do is we want to access a function that is given to us called initState. So initState basically is a function that runs as soon as your app builds. Okay, it's one of the first things that runs when your app builds. So we want this to run as soon as our app builds so that we pull in our data. Okay, so what we can do is I would simply now call this trending movies, and then I'll give it the value. Since I said it was going to be late, so that's why I didn't assign anything. So I'm now making the assignment here. So I'll make the assignment from my API dot get trending movies like this. And why am I getting this error? So let me grab that and put that here. It's supposed to be in here, so don't put it outside there like I did. Okay, so let's go ahead and then finish our API so that we can see if we are getting anything. So what I'll do is I'm just going to say else for now so that we can end that part, and then say else, and we are going to throw an exception, very basic exception, and then say like something happened. Am I spelling that right? All right, so since we said this is going to return some lists or future value, we need to go ahead and then return that. So unfortunately, if I try to do this so that we can test, that would not be possible. So let me go ahead and complete this, then we can test that. So below this, I can now return the decoded data. So what I'm going to, I make a mistake somewhere. Oh, okay. So I think I deleted my final by accident. So this decoded data is a list now, and I'm going to map item. Okay. So here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to call it movie. So I'm going to map each movie into its own object. And since we already created a class to handle that, then I can say for each movie object, I want to map it to the movie.fromJSON. And remember, it takes a JSON object. So if we go back to the movie.dat, this here, it takes that JSON object. And that JSON object is exactly what we are returning here, the results. So we are going to pass in each movie item here. And then we need to convert this to a list, so to list. So I'm going to save this. Hopefully we've not broken the code. And I'm going to open the terminal. And then let's see if we can get any results. So the only way I can get a result is if I make a print statement. So let me make a print here. So print decoded data. Yes, it will tell us not to do that. So I'm going to first make a refresh and then see if we get anything. So I probably need to be here. Okay. So if you look closely, we're able to return the, so you can see adult false backdrop path. We have that, the title, the flash, we have the overview. So we are indeed receiving data. Okay, we are indeed receiving that decoded data. Okay, so I can get rid of this print statement. Now, not every API will require you to do something like this. So it just depends on what you are getting. If what you are getting is a list, then that's it. You don't need to do this. But I need to go in one step and then access the results portion of the API, which is this part. Okay, that's what I'm interested in. So now we know our API is working because we are able to, we saw we could get data. Okay, now this video is getting long. So what I'll do is I'll just talk to you guys about what I was saying. So if we go back to a movie.dat, notice how I had to do this all by myself. And sometimes the huge volumes of data you might be receiving would just be too much for you to do all of this. So what you can do is, I believe there are extensions that can do this for you. So for example, I'm going to cut, I think after this part. And then I believe if you just control period on movie, you can generate a data class. So if I click on this, so forget about this, I'll explain what it is. But you can see we've almost gotten the same thing, like in an instant. Okay, so you can see factual movie from map. So they are creating one from map and a whole lot more complicated things we don't really need. Okay, that is one. And I think also from here, you saw we could just generate a constructor, which I went ahead and I manually did. So just holding control period, you can see we have some of these things done for us. So if I do this, then I get the copy with method and has all of these things. Now, another way to do this, so I've just brought back what I had. Another way to do this is to use a service. So we have this QUICKTYPE.io where they convert JSON into what most languages. So if I click generate code now, what you need is when you receive your JSON like this, copy everything. So from that all the way to whichever page it ends. So I'm going to make a copy of that. And then inside here, what I want to do is replace everything like so, and then give it the name. So remember we called it movie. So call it movie, and that does that for us. But if you check on this side, currently the language is Swift, so we can switch this to Dart, and as you can see, we have a whole lot of things done for us. So you can see a lot of what I was doing is done here already, and you can see this is considering the entire JSON. So it's getting things like the adult and things like we ignored, and you can see it has separated them into a different class because you have the map itself, and then you have the inner part, which is the result, so which has a lot of things. So essentially this is all I would have copied from the site. Okay, let's say even if I wanted the to JSON, I would have copied all of this, pasted it in, and then literally get rid of the parts that I don't want. You can do that. Okay, so this is one way of easily getting that done, but I thought I'll show you how you can do it manually when you are working with little data. You also have some packages, JSON serializer, that you can use to also achieve the same thing, and I think that's the more widely recommended one. So yeah, you just need to, as I'll say, pick and choose your poison. But that's it for this video, guys. It's quite long and it's 1 AM here. My eyes are a bit heavy, sorry. So I'll see you in the next part.